I didn't think much about her the first time. She was just my friend's mom, someone who brought out a plate of sandwiches when we were teenagers, or who drove us to soccer practice when our bikes broke down. She belonged to that blurred space of adulthood you don't pay attention to when you're young. But now I'm older, 24, and things feel different. Or maybe I just notice more. It started, strangely enough, at the bookstore. I was flipping through a paperback I couldn't afford, sipping coffee that had already gone cold. The place was quiet except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. I heard her voice before I saw her. "Do you ever actually finish the books you buy? Or just collect them for decoration?" I looked up, and there she was. My friend's mom. Same face, same eyes, just softer somehow. Tired in a way I hadn't noticed years ago. She was holding a thermos, tapping it against her leg as if to keep her hands busy. I laughed, though it came out too quick. "Mostly decoration." She smiled at that, the kind of smile that doesn't push too hard, just sits there long enough to feel noticed. She glanced at the cover I was holding, then back at me. For a moment, it felt like the room was smaller than it was. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing important. Just books, coffee, the price of things lately. But in between, there were these small pauses, her eyes flicking to the shelves, mine to her hands. I remember how she folded the bookstore's receipt over and over until it was a tight little square she tucked into her pocket. When she left, she touched my arm lightly, like you'd touch a stranger you weren't sure you knew. "Well, good luck with your decorative reading," she said. That night, I found myself opening my phone more than usual. I almost typed out a message to my friend. "Hey, I ran into your mom today." But I didn't. It felt too small to mention, too strange. I sat there with the unsent text glowing on the screen until the battery ran out. The next time, it was at the laundromat. I'd gone late, when the place was nearly empty, just the clatter of machines and fluorescent buzzing. She came in carrying a basket like it weighed more than it should. I offered to help, but she waved me off with a dry, "Don't make me feel old." We ended up sitting across from each other, waiting for our clothes. She asked about work, about whether I was still in touch with her son. The questions were ordinary, but the way she asked them wasn't. She listened, really listened. I don't get that often. When my dryer buzzed, I pulled out my shirts too fast, dropping one. She picked it up, smoothed the wrinkle with her hand before passing it back. The gesture lingered, longer than it should have. She said, as I was leaving, "You don't have to tell him we ran into each other." A pause. Then, softer, "This stays between us." I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. But on the walk home, her words wouldn't leave me alone. And maybe that's why I'm telling this now, because that night, lying awake, I realized I would never forget the way she said it. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, like she knew something I didn't. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence, running into her again. But the more it happened, the harder it was to keep that story straight. One evening, she asked if I could help her carry a box in from her car. It was stacked with old photo albums, the kind with cracked spines and yellowed plastic. She'd been cleaning out the garage. Inside, we set them on the coffee table. She poured tea into 2 chipped mugs, the kind that looked like they'd been around for years. "I used to think I'd keep these forever," she said, sliding one album open. "But half the people in here don't even talk to me anymore." I watched as she pointed to a photo, her younger self, standing beside her husband. They both looked so sure of themselves, like the future was a neat little line they just had to follow. "That was before the divorce," she added, almost as if she was correcting the picture. Her voice didn't crack, but she rubbed the rim of her cup with her thumb the way people do when they're holding something in. I wanted to say something comforting, but all that came out was, "You look happy there." She smiled, but not at the photo, at me. I was. For a while. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, like the steam from the tea curling between us. I kept glancing at her hands, at the way her nails tapped against the porcelain. And of course, in the back of my head, the doubts started running. She's your friend's mom. She's older. This is wrong, or at least it looks wrong. But the more I told myself that, The more I wanted to stay in that room, listening to her voice fill the spaces that had been quiet in me for months. She leaned back, studying me. "You've grown up." "I keep forgetting that." "Not really," I said too quickly, folding the edge of the napkin under my cup. "Still figuring it out." Her laugh was soft, almost private. "We all are." The conversation drifted to lighter things after that. Movies she never finished, a neighbor who always borrowed her tools and never returned them. I found myself watching her talk, memorizing the curve of expressions she made without thinking. I shouldn't have, but I did. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. It should have ended with a polite goodbye, the kind you forget the moment it happens. Instead, she reached up and brushed at my shoulder, just a stray thread from my sweater. But her fingers lingered for a second too long, and I felt the warmth of it long after I stepped outside. Walking home, I kept replaying that touch in my head. Not the thread, not the sweater, just the way she looked at me after, like she hadn't meant to, but didn't regret it either. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I told myself I wouldn't go by her place again. Not so soon. Not after the way her fingers had brushed my shoulder like it meant something. But 2 days later, there I was, standing on her porch with a book I pretended to be returning. She opened the door with a surprised smile. "You read fast." "I didn't," I admitted, holding the book out like proof. "Just thought you might want it back." Her eyes lingered on me, longer than the excuse deserved. She stepped aside. "Come in, then." Tea's on. Inside, everything was quiet except the kettle clicking off. She moved around the kitchen in a way that felt rehearsed, careful. I sat at the counter, tracing the grain of the wood with my thumb, trying to think of something ordinary to say. "How's work?" she asked finally, setting a mug in front of me. I shrugged. "Fine." The silence stretched. She looked at me like she wanted to ask more, but didn't. Her hands rested on the counter, then pulled back, then rested again. And just when I thought something might break, the front door opened. A voice, her son's. "My friend." "Mom? You home?" I froze. She stiffened, eyes flashing to mine, then back toward the hall. The moment collapsed. She lowered her voice. Quick, steady. "Stay? Just stay quiet a second." I heard him moving around, footsteps fading toward his room, a door shutting. My chest wouldn't unclench until the house went still again. She let out a breath, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You should probably go before he notices." I nodded, standing too quickly, nearly knocking the mug over. She caught it with one hand, steady, while mine just hung there, useless. At the door, I hesitated. She was closer than she should have been, standing right in front of me. The air between us felt charged, like static. Her eyes flicked to my mouth for half a second, or maybe I only imagined it. I started to say something, but the words snagged in my throat. She whispered, almost like she hadn't meant for me to hear, "This is a bad idea." Still, she didn't move away. My hand twitched at my side, wanting, without permission, to touch her wrist, her hand, anything. But I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I just stood there, caught between leaving and staying, my breath too shallow, hers too even. And for one impossible second, I thought she might lean in. But the sound of her son's door opening down the hall broke it. She stepped back, the moment severed. "Go," she said softly. So I did. And on the walk home, every step felt heavier, like I'd almost touched something I couldn't put back. We didn't plan to meet. I was just walking back from work, headphones in, trying not to think too much. But there she was, sitting on a park bench with a paperback folded open, unread. She noticed me before I could decide whether to stop. "Long day?" she asked, shading her eyes from the fading sun. "Yeah," I said, slipping the headphones around my neck. I sat down beside her, not too close. Not far, either. For a while, we just watched the street across from us. Cars sliding past, a couple walking a dog. Ordinary. Safe. But I could feel the air between us buzzing, like something waiting. She closed the book without marking the page. "I saw you with someone the other day. At the cafe." I blinked, trying to recall. Oh, just a coworker. Her nod was small, but her mouth pressed thin, like she was holding something back. She didn't look at me. I realized then it mattered to her. The thought twisted something inside me. Why do you care? I asked before I could stop myself. My voice came out too soft, almost unsure. That made her glance over, startled. She let out a breathy laugh, but it didn't sound amused. I don't. I mean, she broke off, her hands fidgeting with the spine of the book. I just noticed things, that's all. The silence that followed felt sharper than words. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You said before, this was a bad idea. It is, she said quickly. Then quieter. But that doesn't stop me from thinking about it. Her honesty hit harder than if she'd shouted. I turned to her, but she was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, like she'd already said too much. My chest felt tight, as if the world had shrunk down to this bench, this evening light, this space between us. I wanted to tell her everything, that I thought about her too, that I hadn't slept properly since the laundromat, that every time I saw her, I left with more questions than answers. Instead, I said, so what do we do? She finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired and kind and full of something I couldn't name without ruining it. We don't, she whispered. And yet she didn't move away. Her hand rested between us, close enough that if I shifted even slightly, my fingers would brush hers. I could feel the gravity of it pulling at me. For a second, neither of us breathed. I almost asked. I almost leaned in. But instead, I sat frozen, waiting, for her, for me, for anything. She broke the stillness with the faintest question, so soft I almost missed it. Would you regret it? After that night on the bench, things changed. Not all at once. More like a slow tightening, a door quietly closing. She stopped answering my texts right away, where before she'd reply within minutes. Little things like, tease on if you're around, or don't forget your book. Now hours passed. Sometimes whole days. When I did see her, she felt different, smiling too quickly, filling the air with chatter that didn't leave room for pauses, as if she'd built walls overnight and was determined to keep them standing. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of it. The reason? A man's voice on the phone when I dropped by unannounced, muffled laughter in the background. She ended the call too fast, the tension still in her shoulders when she opened the door. Everything okay? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Fine, she said. Too easily. Just an old friend. But I saw the shadow in her eyes before she turned away. I didn't ask again. Instead, I stopped showing up as often. Walked past her street without knocking. Pretended I was busy. And maybe I was. Busy trying not to want something I wasn't supposed to want. Busy imagining her sitting on that same couch with someone else, her laughter softer, freer, with him. The whiplash was dizzying. One moment I'd catch her looking at me the way she had that night. The next she'd pull back, shut down, vanish. It left me suspended between hope and doubt. I thought about saying something, really saying it, laying it all out. The truth I kept pressing down. But every time, the words died before they reached my mouth. One night, I typed a message. I don't know what this is, but I can't stop thinking about you. My thumb hovered over send until the phone dimmed in my hand. I erased it. Started again. Do you want me to stop coming around? Deleted that too. Finally, I just left the screen blank, tossed the phone aside. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Days went by, then a week. I told myself it was for the best, that I'd let it fade, let her fade. But every time I walked past the park bench where we'd sat, or saw the glow of her window in the evening, I felt the silence between us growing louder. I could have knocked. I could have pressed send. Instead, I did nothing. The seat beside her stayed empty. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of day that didn't feel like it deserved a turning point. I was walking home with groceries when I saw her sitting on her front steps, sweater pulled tight, a mug resting between her palms. She looked up, surprised. Then she didn't look away. I hesitated at the gate. I could have kept walking, but my feet didn't listen. I crossed over, stopped at the bottom of her steps. Hey, Her voice was soft, like she'd been rehearsing it, and still got it wrong. For a while, neither of us said more. The air carried that faint chill that comes just before spring turns. She shifted on the step, patting the space beside her. I sat down. Close, but not too close. The mug in her hands was half full, steam long gone. "I thought you weren't coming by anymore," she said finally. "I thought you didn't want me to." She gave a small laugh, but it caught in her throat. I didn't know what I wanted. That felt truer than anything else we'd said in months. I looked at her hands, the chipped nail polish, the way her fingers tightened around the mug. I kept almost saying something, I admitted, but I didn't know if it would make things worse. Her eyes flicked to mine, quick and searching. "What were you going to say?" My chest tightened. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "That I think about you. More than I should." The words hung there, bare. No dressing them up, no excuses. She let out a breath, staring down at the mug as if it might give her an answer. Then she set it aside, her hands suddenly empty, restless. "I think about you too," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it, and it landed heavier than any touch we'd shared. I waited for her to take it back, to cover it up with a joke. But she didn't. She just sat there, shoulders slightly slumped, like the truth had taken something out of her. "I'm scared," she added after a pause, "of what this means, of what it could ruin." "Me too," I said, and I meant it. Silence again, but it wasn't sharp this time. It was fragile, something that could either break or hold, depending on what we did next. Her hand rested on the step between us, close enough that I could feel its warmth even without touching. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to reach across that gap and hadn't. So I did now. Not much. Just my fingers brushing hers, light enough to pull away if she wanted. She didn't pull away. We sat like that, hands barely touching, the quiet between us fuller than any words we could have said. She turned to me then, her mouth curving into the smallest smile. "Okay." And that was it. Nothing more. Nothing less. Time didn't rush after that night on the steps. It unfolded slowly, like the pages of a book left half open. We didn't suddenly become something dramatic. There were no stolen weekends away, no whispered promises under moonlight. What there was instead felt quieter, but somehow truer, small things that stitched themselves into routine. I started stopping by more often. Not every day, not in any predictable pattern, but enough that it became normal. Sometimes I'd bring coffee from the corner shop, hers black, mine with too much sugar. Sometimes she'd make tea, the chipped mugs between us on the kitchen counter. We talked, but not always about us. Work, neighbors, the book she never finished. The way spring sunlight hit the porch at 8:47 a.m., sharp and clean. Those mornings, she'd sit wrapped in a sweater, and I'd sit beside her, letting the silence fill itself without effort. The park bench became ours again, though never officially. We'd meet there when the weather was kind. She'd bring a paperback, I'd pretend to read, and most of the time we'd just watch people pass by. Sometimes our hands found each other, sometimes they didn't. Both ways felt okay. Her son never asked questions, or maybe he never noticed. Life kept moving around us, work shifts, errands, bills. None of it stopped. But inside the ordinary, something had shifted. There were still days when she pulled back, when I caught her staring at the ground as if weighing all the risks again. And there were days when I doubted myself, wondered if I was just filling a space that didn't belong to me. But then she'd glance over with that tired, quiet smile, the one that felt like it was meant only for me, and the doubts softened, at least for a while. It wasn't perfect. It was just real. One evening, as the light folded into dusk, we sat on the bench, a thermos of tea between us. She reached over, tucked a loose thread back into my sleeve, the same way she had months ago. "This stays between us," she murmured again, but this time it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a promise, soft and steady. I smiled, holding her gaze for a long moment. Okay. And that was enough. Because the truth was, life didn't give us grand endings. It gave us quiet ones. And sometimes, if you were lucky, those were the kind that stayed with you the longest.